For centuries, Earth had been nothing more than a quiet, ignored world, dismissed by the rest of the galaxy as weak and unworthy of attention. But now, the time for silence was over. As humanity's vengeance fleet awakens, it reveals a power far beyond what the Council ever imagined. The galaxy is about to learn that Earth's silence was the greatest weapon of all. The Alien Council had gathered once again, their discussions filled with arrogance and mockery. The human race was far behind in every respect, technologically inferior, culturally divided, and barely capable of defending itself from the whims of more advanced civilizations. For centuries, they had watched as humanity fought among itself, sending occasional, insignificant signals into space, hoping for something beyond their reach. But now, after all these years, the Council's patience was wearing thin. It was time to deal with the humans once and for all. We have no need to fear them, the Vaxian leader said with a scoff, leaning back in his chair, his multifaceted eyes glinting with amusement. Their ships are outdated, their technology ancient. What could they possibly do against us? The Gorthian leader, always more cautious, nodded slowly. They've been silent for too long. It's as if they've given up. We've wiped out entire civilizations before, and Earth will be no different. Exactly, the Zarthian leader added, his voice dripping with arrogance. They've been waiting for something, yes, but what could they possibly have to offer? They are nothing. The council members laughed, their arrogance thick in the air. They had long since dismissed Earth as irrelevant. Humanity had been silent. For so long, their world nothing but a faint, far-off signal, insignificant. How could they possibly pose any threat? On Earth, the diplomat stood in the command center of the underground facility, his face unreadable. The room was eerily quiet as he stared at the holographic displays showing the final preparations for the fleet's launch. The ships that had been hidden for centuries were now awakening, their systems coming online, their engines powering up. The time for silence was over. A low hum vibrated through the room as the ship's engines roared to life. These were not sleek, advanced ships like the ones the Council had. No, Earth's fleet was something far more primitive, but far more powerful than anything the galaxy had seen before. Built for raw power, these ships were designed not for grace, but for sheer, unstoppable force. "Fleet ready," an officer said, his voice steady despite the tension. "We're locked onto the Council's coordinates." The diplomat nodded, his mind already on the battle ahead. Begin the countdown. Meanwhile, far away in the Council chamber, the leaders continued their discussion, convinced that the humans were no threat. They couldn't fathom that Earth, a planet they'd long dismissed as a backwater, had quietly been preparing for this moment. And when the time came, they would understand just how wrong they were. "Prepare the fleets," the Zarthian leader ordered, his voice filled with confidence. "We will strike Earth down before they even have a chance to respond." As the council members set their plans in motion, a strange feeling began to settle over them, a slight unease, a nagging doubt. It was nothing they could pinpoint, just a fleeting sensation that something wasn't quite right. But they shrugged it off, thinking it was nothing more than the natural tension before a battle. After all, Earth was nothing compared to the power. They commanded. The diplomat's face remained stoic as the final countdown on Earth's fleet reached zero. His eyes flickered toward the large display in front of him, where Earth's ships, raw, brutal, and ancient, began to break free from their deep space stations, emerging from the shadows like predators ready to strike. There was no grace, no elegance in their movement, only raw power. "Let them think we're weak," the diplomat muttered to himself. "Let them think we've been silent out of fear." Humanity had been patient, yes, but their silence had not been weakness, it had been preparation. They had been waiting for the right moment to strike, and now that moment had come. The first volley from Earth's ships hit the Council's defenses like a hammer. The raw energy from the human warships was unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Blasts of kinetic force that ripped through their ships like paper, bypassing their advanced shields as if they didn't exist. "Impossible," the Vaxian shouted, his voice high with panic. "They're weapons. How can they be so powerful?" The Council leader's eyes widened, realizing too late that they had made a grave mistake. Earth was not weak. Earth had been silent, waiting, and now that silence was shattering everything the Council had worked for. They thought it was mercy. The diplomat's voice echoed over the comm systems, carrying across the vast distance between Earth and the Council. It wasn't. The first wave of the Council's fleet began to break apart, their once impenetrable ships now falling to Earth's assault. As the debris floated in space, the Council's arrogance crumbled into confusion and fear. They were witnessing the end of their reign, not just a defeat, but a reckoning. And that was just the beginning. As the human fleet advanced, the diplomatic officer turned to the command center with a calm, almost emotionless expression. "Phase 1 complete. Prepare for Phase 2. Let the galaxy understand what happens when you underestimate humanity." The silence of centuries had ended, and with it, Earth's vengeance had begun. The aftermath of the first wave was nothing short of chaos. The remnants of the Council's flagship drifted through space, its hull torn apart by the brutal assault from Earth's fleet. The other ships in the fleet had suffered the same fate, mangled and torn as humanity's weapons tore through them with unrelenting force. What was once a coordinated, formidable military machine had now dissolved into scattered debris and desperate retreat. The Zarthian leader, standing at the center of his command room, gripped the edges of his console, his knuckles turning white. He stared at the display in disbelief, watching as the once unified fleet fell apart before his eyes. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice strained. "How are they so powerful?" "They were waiting," the Vaxian leader answered, his voice shaking. "We thought they were weak, but they were preparing for this moment. And now we're paying the price." The Council had long dismissed Earth's silence as weakness. They had assumed that humanity, with its primitive technology and fractured society, had nothing to offer. But that assumption had been a fatal mistake. The Zarthian leader's mind raced, trying to comprehend the situation. The humans had been quiet for so long, but now they had exploded into action, and the galaxy was witnessing the force of that silence. "We need to regroup," the Gorthian leader said, his voice cold but practical. "The humans have shown us their strength. We can't afford to underestimate them again." "But we still have the ancient weapons," the Zarthian leader argued. "If we deploy them, we can wipe them out in a single strike. We still have that advantage." The Council's confidence had been shattered, but there was still a flicker of arrogance remaining. The Council had always relied on their technological superiority, but now, as they regrouped, they were beginning to see that it wasn't enough. They had failed to account for the one thing that made humanity dangerous: their resolve. Back on Earth, the diplomat watched the chaos unfold on the massive screens in front of him. The initial strike had been successful, but it was only the beginning. The enemy fleet was broken, yes, but humanity had learned long ago that true victory required more than just a single battle. "Phase 1 was successful," the diplomat said, his voice calm. "Now we move to Phase 2. Let's finish this." The officer beside him nodded, inputting the commands into the system. "All ships are ready for Phase 2, sir. The second wave is on standby." The diplomat's eyes flickered over the tactical map. Humanity's fleet wasn't just large. It was diverse. The ships were a mix of ancient, sturdy designs, modified and adapted with the latest human innovations. They were a force of sheer brutality, powered by Earth's ingenuity and a burning desire for vengeance. "Deploy the second wave," the diplomat ordered. As the second wave of Earth's fleet surged forward, the Council's retreating forces scrambled to regroup. Their ships, though technologically superior, were in disarray. The first wave had already crippled their ability to fight back. And now, with the second wave coming in fast, the Council realized they were trapped. "We've lost our advantage," the Vaxian muttered. "Their ships, are they powered by something we don't understand?" The Council had underestimated the humans' capacity for innovation. Their ships may have appeared outdated, primitive even, but their weapons were devastating. The Council's superior technology had failed to withstand the force of Earth's simple yet powerful approach. The Zarthian leader's eyes darted from one display to the next as the human ships closed in, their weapons firing in a rapid, unrelenting barrage. "Get us out of here!" he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "Activate the warp drives! We need to retreat now!" But it was too late. The human ships were faster, more agile. They were closing in from every angle, and the Council's forces were trapped in a deadly crossfire. On Earth, the diplomat stood in front of a massive view screen, watching as the final remnants of the Council's fleet were systematically torn apart. He had been part of this plan for years. Every detail, every ship, every tactic had been designed with one purpose: to show the galaxy what happened when Earth's silence was broken. "They thought it was mercy," the diplomat whispered to himself, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his lips. It wasn't. As the last of the Council's ships were destroyed, the diplomat turned to the officers around him. "Phase 2 is complete. Now we wait." The Council had been outclassed, their fleet destroyed, and their once immense power reduced to nothing. But humanity's message was not yet complete. The diplomat knew that the galaxy needed to understand the true extent of Earth's power, and it wasn't just about destroying ships. It was about sending a message. Earth would no longer be ignored. Humanity was a force that could no longer be silenced. Back in the Council chamber, the leaders sat in stunned silence, their once proud empire now shattered. The last of their ships had been destroyed, and their weapons had failed them. The Council had been brought to its knees by the very species they had once dismissed as weak. "We've lost," the Gorthian said quietly, the defeat in his voice undeniable. "There's nothing left. Earth has shown us that we were wrong. We underestimated them, and now we've paid the price." The Zarthian leader's gaze remained fixed on the screens, his expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he muttered almost to himself. "We will regroup. We will rebuild. Earth's victory will be short-lived." But there was a crack in his voice, a doubt that had not been there before. The Council had been defeated. But what worried him more was the realization that Earth's silence had been their greatest weapon. For centuries humanity had waited, and now the galaxy had learned what it meant to awaken the wrath of a silent, vengeful planet. The diplomat's words echoed in the Council leader's mind. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. And now, as the remnants of their fleet drifted helplessly through space, the galaxy would never forget the day Earth had returned stronger than anyone had ever imagined. The once dominant Galactic Council now found itself in full retreat, its forces shattered in the wake of humanity's unexpected assault. What had been assumed to be a swift victory had turned into a nightmare. The fleets of the Zarthians, Vaxians, and Gorthians, each known for their advanced technology and unmatched military might, were crumbling before the relentless barrage of Earth's ships. The quiet, unassuming world that had been dismissed as insignificant was proving to be far more than a match for them. The last of the Zarthian warships drifted in space, its hull torn open, energy reserves drained. The Council's hopes of escaping had dissolved into nothing. The remaining ships, once so sure of their superiority, were now caught in an inescapable trap. Earth's fleet, more brutal and far less elegant than anything the Council had ever faced, moved in with precision, its weapons firing without mercy. On the command deck of the last standing council vessel, the Vaxian leader stared at the screens, his face pale and drawn. The once proud fleet was all but gone, reduced to floating debris. How did we miss this? He whispered, more to himself than anyone else. How could we have been so blind? The Gorthian leader, who had always maintained an air of stoicism, slammed his fist against the console in frustration. It was arrogance. We thought we could crush them like any other primitive race, but we failed to account for their resolve. Their silence was not weakness, it was strategy. The Zarthian leader, still gripping the armrests of his chair, looked out of the observation window at the vast emptiness of space. His empire was crumbling, and with it, his dreams of galactic dominance. "What now?" he muttered, his voice low. "What do we do when everything we've built has been torn down by a single race?" The room was filled with a heavy silence, the weight of the question settling over them like a cloud of doom. There was no easy answer. The humans had not only defeated their fleets, they had sent a message that resonated across the stars, one that no empire, no matter how advanced, could ignore. On Earth, the diplomat watched the aftermath unfold on the screens, his face expressionless. The first wave of attacks had destroyed the council's fleets, but it wasn't just about the ships. It was about the message they had sent, a message of vengeance and power. Humanity had been underestimated for far too long, and now the galaxy would feel the consequences. The officers in the command center were busy monitoring the tactical feeds, ensuring that the second wave of attacks was following through. But the diplomat didn't need to look at the data. He already knew the outcome. "They thought it was mercy," the diplomat said softly, his voice carrying through the quiet room. But it wasn't. His words were not meant for anyone in particular, but they hung in the air like a warning. Humanity had been silent for centuries, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would forget them. But now that silence had been broken and the galaxy would never forget Earth again. "Phase 2 is complete," an officer reported. "All remaining. Council forces are in retreat. Their last bastion is falling." The diplomat nodded, but there was no joy in his face. This wasn't about victory. It was about something much deeper. It was about showing the galaxy that Earth was no longer a place to be ignored, that humanity had the strength to shape its own fate. The final stages of the Council's fall were unfolding in real time, and as their last ship scrambled to escape, Earth's fleet closed in, delivering blow after devastating blow. The battle wasn't over yet, but the Council's power was in its death throes. Humanity had not only destroyed their forces, it had exposed their arrogance. In the Council's final command chamber, the remaining leaders sat in stunned silence. Their communication systems were down, their ships disabled. The damage was done. The galaxy's once greatest empire was now a shadow of its former self, its leaders unsure of what to do next. The Zarthian leader slowly turned to his fellow commanders, his voice hoarse. "We failed," he said, the words carrying the weight of defeat. "We thought we could crush them, but we were wrong." The Vaxian's voice was almost a whisper. "Now, the galaxy knows what happens when you ignore Earth." On Earth, the diplomat's eyes remained fixed on the screens, his mind already turning to the next steps. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Humanity had sent a message to the Council, and now it was time to send a message to the galaxy. "They thought it was mercy," the diplomat said again, his tone hardening. But it wasn't. The silence that followed was profound. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that after centuries had been broken with a vengeance. And as the last remnants of the Council's fleet were destroyed, Earth's silent fury had become a roar that could no longer be ignored. The galaxy would never again view humanity as weak, They would never again make the mistake of underestimating Earth. The galaxy had witnessed the awakening of a force that would change the course of history, and the stars themselves would remember. Earth's vengeance. With the Council's forces obliterated, Earth's vengeance fleet has completed its mission. The remaining leaders of the Galactic Council must face the consequences of their hubris. As humanity's message reverberates through the galaxy, the Council's downfall is sealed. Earth is no longer a forgotten world, but a force that will shape the future of the stars. The final remnants of the Council's fleet were little more than drifting husks of burning metal scattered across the cold expanse of space. Earth's vengeance had been swift and decisive, leaving nothing but the wreckage of an empire that had once ruled with impunity. The Council had underestimated humanity, believing Earth to be weak, forgotten. Now they would learn the true cost of their arrogance. In the Council's last surviving command chamber, silence descended. The once proud leaders, their faces pale and eyes wide with shock, stared at the screens, watching as their ships were reduced to rubble. The galaxy they had ruled was crumbling before them. A testament to their failure, the Zarthian leader's voice trembled with disbelief. "It's over. Everything we built, gone." The Gorthian leader, who had long prided himself on his calm demeanor, now sat slumped in his chair, staring at the remains of their fleet. "We thought we could crush them. We thought they were nothing. How could we be so wrong?" Across the galaxy, the message was clear. Earth was no longer the forgotten backwater world it had once been. Humanity had risen from the silence of centuries, and now the Council's empire was no more. Back on Earth, the diplomat stood in front of the tactical screens, his expression cold but resolute. The battle was won, but the war was never about conquest. It was about ensuring that humanity's voice would never again be silenced. Phase 3 complete, an officer reported. The last remnants of their forces are in retreat. The galaxy is ours to rebuild. The diplomat's lips curled into a faint, grim smile. It wasn't about mercy, it was about justice. With that, Earth's vengeance was complete. The Council had been crushed, and humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer in question. And, as the stars above Earth glowed, the galaxy would never forget the day Earth returned stronger than anyone had ever imagined.